built my shelter 3 weeks before the world ended, back when zombie apocalypse was still something people joked about at barbecues. The Coast Guard Station observation deck wasn't supposed to be my fortress. It was supposed to be my escape from a messy divorce and a job that was grinding me into paste. I'd taken the posting at the abandoned Keeper's Point station, thinking I'd have 6 months of solitude to figure out my life. The station had been decommissioned in 2019, but the Park Service maintained it as a historic site, and they needed someone to live on site during the off-season. Perfect for a man who wanted to disappear without actually disappearing. The observation deck sits 42 feet above the rocky coastline, accessible only by a narrow spiral staircase bolted to the exterior of the main tower. I'd spent the first 2 weeks reinforcing that staircase's bottom section with a removable ladder system, 12 feet of aluminum extension ladder that I could haul up and secure to the platform. At the time, I told myself it was about security, about keeping vandals or curious teenagers from climbing up uninvited. I'd bolt the ladder down during the day, pull it up at night. Simple. I didn't know I was preparing to survive the end of everything. The deck itself is roughly 12 by 12 feet, enclosed on 3 sides by the tower's brick walls and open to the ocean on the 4th. There's a small equipment room built into the tower, maybe 8 by 10, that used to house radio gear and weather monitoring equipment. That's where I sleep now, where I've stacked my supplies, where I sit in the dark listening to them scratch at the base of the tower 40 feet below. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were my supply run days. I'd drive the 15 miles into Harlow to stock up at the grocery store, maybe grab a beer at McCready's if I was feeling social. I'd noticed the traffic was heavier than usual heading out of town, people loading up trucks with more stuff than seemed normal for early October. The kid at the checkout counter, couldn't have been more than 19, was sweating despite the store's aggressive air conditioning. "You hear about Boston?" he asked, scanning my canned goods without looking at them. I hadn't. I'd been living without internet for 2 weeks by choice, radio for background noise only. Trying to detox from the constant connectivity that had made my old life feel like drowning. "Some kind of riot," the kid continued. "Started at a hospital. My cousin sent me videos, but they looked fake as hell. People eating people and shit. I made a non-committal noise and paid cash. On the drive back, I noticed more cars heading away from the coast, inland toward the highway. A Massachusetts state trooper blew past me going at least 90, lights on but no siren. Something cold settled in my stomach, that animal instinct that knows when the weather's about to turn bad. Back at the station, I climbed the stairs to my deck and stood looking out at the Atlantic. The water was gray-green and restless, whitecaps forming far out where the shelf dropped away. A fishing boat was coming in fast, too fast, its engine screaming even from a mile out. I watched it ground itself on the rocks south of the station, watched 3 people jump out and start running inland without even securing the vessel. That's when I turned on the radio. The emergency broadcast system was already active on every channel. Remain indoors. Avoid contact with individuals displaying aggressive behavior. Do not attempt to approach or assist those who appear injured or ill. Seek high ground or secured locations. Military personnel are being deployed to major population centers. I stood on that deck with the radio in my hand, watching the fishing boat get pounded by waves against the rocks, and I made a decision. I wasn't going inland. Inland meant highways clogged with panicked people, meant cities, meant chaos. I was 42 feet above sea level on a platform that could only be reached by a ladder I controlled. I had some food, I had water. The station's old cistern still functioned, collecting rainwater that I'd been boiling and filtering. I had a chance here. I spent the rest of Tuesday moving everything I could possibly need up to the deck. Every can from my small pantry, every bottle of water, the camping stove and propane tanks, sleeping bag, first aid kit, tools, rope, the tarp I'd been meaning to use to cover my truck. I made 6 trips up and down those spiral stairs, my legs burning, my mind racing faster than my body could move. The truck, I'd have to abandon it. I parked it behind the station's maintenance shed, locked it, and left the keys inside. If I survived whatever this was, I'd need it. If I didn't, it wouldn't matter. The last thing I brought up was my father's hunting rifle and 2 boxes of ammunition. I'd inherited the rifle when he died 3 years ago, brought it to the station thinking I might do some shooting, work through some things. I hadn't fired it once. Now, I loaded it with hands that shook slightly and set it in the equipment room within easy reach. By sunset Tuesday, I had the ladder pulled up and secured. The Coast Guard station sat on an isolated point 2 miles from the nearest house, 7 miles from Harlow proper. I was alone out here with the ocean and the rocks and the circling gulls. I thought maybe I'd gotten lucky, gotten ahead of whatever was happening. Wednesday morning proved me wrong. I woke to screaming, high and thin and coming from the coast road. I crawled to the edge of the deck and looked down. A woman was running along the narrow path that led from the parking area to the station, looking back over her shoulder every few steps. She was barefoot, wearing what looked like pajamas, and her right arm hung at a wrong angle. Behind her came 3 people moving in that gait I'd only seen in videos I'd assumed were fake, lurching but fast, heads tilted forward, arms reaching. The woman saw the station tower and ran toward it, screaming, "Help me, please, someone help me!" I stood up. The rifle was in my hands. I didn't remember picking it up. The woman reached the base of the spiral stairs and started climbing, one-handed, gasping. The 3 figures reached the stairs 5 seconds later and followed without hesitation. They climbed like spiders, using hands and feet, mouths open in soundless hunger. "Jump!" I shouted down. "Jump to the platform, I'll pull you up." She didn't hear me or didn't understand. She kept climbing, spiral after spiral, and they kept following, gaining on her. She was maybe 20 feet from the deck when the first one grabbed her ankle. She kicked backward, connected with its face, kept climbing. The thing didn't slow down. It pulled itself up her body like she was a rope, bit down on her calf, and she shrieked. Her good hand lost its grip. She fell backward into the arms of the other 2. I watched them pull her down, pile onto her on the stairs about 30 feet below my position. I watched her stop screaming. I watched her stop moving. I watched them feed. Then, I threw up over the railing on the ocean side of the deck, heaved until nothing came up but bile and shame. When I could look again, the woman's body was still on the stairs. The 3 figures that had killed her were gone. I saw them moving away along the coast path, drawn by something I couldn't see or hear. The woman lay crumpled on the metal stairs, her body bent around the spiral, blood dripping down through the grating to the rocks below. I waited an hour. She didn't move. I thought about climbing down, checking for a pulse, doing something decent. But I could see the wounds on her leg, on her shoulder. I'd heard the reports. Bites transmitted it, whatever it was. At 2:17 p.m. Wednesday afternoon, the woman opened her eyes. She didn't get up right away. She lay there staring at nothing, her neck bent at an angle that should have been painful. Then, with movements that looked like someone remembering how their body worked, she stood up. Pieces of her were missing. I won't describe them. She stood on the stairs and lifted her head toward the deck, toward me. Her eyes were clouded over like cataracts, milky white. Her mouth hung open. She started climbing. I raised the rifle. My hands were steady now. She climbed closer, 15 feet, 10 feet. Her broken arm dangled uselessly, but she pulled herself up one-handed, feet finding purchase, never looking away from where I stood at the railing. At 8 feet I could smell her, copper and waste and something sweet rotten underneath. "I'm sorry," I said. She didn't react. 7 feet. I shot her in the chest. The sound was enormous, echoing off the tower, sending gulls screaming into the air. She fell backward, tumbled down the spiral stairs, landed in a heap at the bottom. 2 minutes later, she stood up again and resumed climbing. The second shot took off the top of her skull. She dropped like her strings were cut. This time, she stayed down. I sat on the deck with the rifle across my knees for 3 hours, watching her body, making sure. The sun moved west. The ocean kept its rhythm. Gulls returned and investigated the corpse. I watched and I didn't think about her pajamas or her bare feet or the fact that she'd been running to me for help. Thursday morning, I woke to find 17 of them at the base of the tower. They must have come during the night, drawn by the gunshots or by some instinct I didn't understand. They milled around the bottom of the spiral stairs, bumping into each other, reaching upward with pale hands. Some of them moaned, low sounds that carried on the wind. Others were silent. All of them stared up at the deck with those clouded eyes. I recognized some of them. The harbor master from Harlow, a woman who worked at the post office, a kid who couldn't have been more than 12. They wore the clothes they'd died in, work uniforms, school clothes, someone's wedding dress. I counted them twice. 17. The woman from yesterday still lay crumpled at the base of the stairs, the back of her head gone. The others paid her no attention. I had food for maybe 3 weeks if I was careful, water for longer, assuming rain. The rifle had 38 rounds left. I did the math and didn't like the answer. They stayed all day Thursday. When I moved at the railing, they reached toward me, moaning louder. When I sat still in the equipment room, they settled into a restless waiting. Around sunset, 3 of them wandered away, drawn by something on the wind. 14 remained. Friday. I made an inventory. 7 cans of soup, 4 cans of beans, 6 cans of vegetables, 2 jars of peanut butter, a box of crackers, 12 granola bars, 3 packages of beef jerky, salt, pepper, a bottle of multivitamins, and 5 gallons of water in various containers. The cistern on the roof collected rainwater, but I'd need to rig something to access it safely. I had 2 propane tanks for the camping stove, 1 full, 1 half empty. I had a sleeping bag, 3 changes of clothes, a first aid kit, a flashlight with spare batteries, my phone with no signal, a weather radio, a knife, 50 feet of rope, the tarp, duct tape, and the rifle with 38 rounds. I rationed myself to 1 meal a day, eaten at sunset. Soup or beans heated on the camping stove, a handful of crackers, water. The hunger was bad, but manageable. I'd been trying to lose weight anyway. Dark humor helped. The dead below didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't leave. More came throughout Friday. By sunset, I counted 23. Saturday it rained. I spread the tarp across the railing and funneled water into every container I had. The dead stood in the rain without reacting, faces turned upward, water running down their bodies. I collected 4 gallons before the rain stopped. The temperature dropped into the 40s, and I wrapped myself in the sleeping bag, shivering, watching them through the equipment room's small window. One of them was trying to climb the stairs. Over and over, it would grip the lowest step, pull itself up, fall backward. It never stopped trying. I watched it fail 50 times and felt something like pity, then remembered the woman in pajamas and felt nothing at all. Sunday I heard helicopters, 2 of them, military, flying low over the coast. I ran to the railing and waved my arms, shouted until my throat was raw. They circled once, twice. I saw someone looking down at me through binoculars from the open door. Then they flew away inland. The dead below had all turned to watch the helicopters. When the sound faded, they turned back to me. Monday was the first day I thought about jumping. Not seriously, not yet. But I looked down at the rocks 40 feet below and wondered if it would be quick. Better than starving, maybe. Better than whatever happened if I ran out of water or got sick or fell asleep and rolled off the edge. I shook it off. I ate half a can of vegetables cold because I wanted to conserve propane. I counted my supplies again and reached the same conclusions. I needed rescue, or I needed the dead to leave, or I needed to figure out how to get down and pass them to my truck. The truck, 7 miles to Harlow. Maybe I could find more supplies there, more food, medicine, weapons. Maybe I could find other survivors. Maybe Harlow was clear and I was sitting up here starving for nothing. Or maybe Harlow was packed with hundreds of them and I'd die within minutes of leaving the relative safety of this deck. I spent Monday afternoon tying knots in the rope, practicing. If I could rappel down the ocean side of the tower, I'd land on rocks instead of near the stairs. The dead seemed fixated on the stairs, on the route up. Maybe they wouldn't notice me on the far side. Maybe I could make it to the truck. Maybe was a word I was starting to hate. Tuesday, 1 week since this started, I woke to silence. I crawled to the railing and looked down. The base of the tower was empty. No dead, no bodies, nothing. They were gone. I didn't trust it. I sat at the railing for 2 hours, watching for movement, listening for moans. The wind blew off the ocean. Gulls cried and dove for fish. The waves hit the rocks in their eternal rhythm. No dead. At noon, I lowered the ladder. My legs shook as I climbed down, rifle slung across my back. Every spiral of the stairs felt like descending into a throat. I expected hands to grab my ankles, teeth to sink into my calves. Nothing. I reached the bottom and stood on solid ground for the first time in 7 days. The woman in pajamas still lay where she'd fallen. Her body bloating, the smell strong enough to make my eyes water. I stepped around her and moved toward the maintenance shed where I'd left the truck. The parking area looked like a bomb had gone off. Cars abandoned at crazy angles, doors open, belongings scattered. Blood stained the pavement in dark streaks. I saw a child's backpack lying in a puddle. I didn't look closer. The truck was where I'd left it, untouched. I pulled the keys from under the seat and started the engine. It turned over immediately, that reliable old Ford sound. I nearly cried. Then I saw them in the rearview mirror. At least 40 of them coming from the direction of the coast road, moving faster than I'd seen them move before, drawn by the sound of the engine. I threw the truck in reverse, spun around, and floored it toward the road. The coast road was packed. Cars abandoned bumper to bumper, no way through. I saw bodies in some of them, both kinds. The dead and the moving dead. I slammed the brakes and looked for options. Behind me, the 40 from the beach. Ahead, blocked road. To the left, ocean. To the right, woods too thick for the truck. I threw it in reverse again, back toward the station, and made a decision. I drove the truck as close to the tower as I could, grabbed everything useful from the cab. Half a bag of chips, a warm Coke, a roll of paper towels, a blanket, and ran for the stairs. They were close enough that I could hear their feet on the pavement, their labored breathing. I hit the stairs, climbing 3 at a time, my lungs burning, rifle banging against my spine. Up and up, spiraling, not looking back. Hands grabbed at my boots. I kicked backward, felt something crunch, kept climbing. I reached the deck and hauled the ladder up with strength born from pure fear. A hand gripped the top rung as I pulled. I grabbed the knife from my belt and brought it down hard. The hand released. The ladder came up. I collapsed on the deck, gasping. Below, the dead crowded around the tower again. More than before, I counted over 60. They'd been waiting in the woods, I realized. Waiting silently. The helicopter noise, the gunshots, they'd learned those sounds meant prey. But the engine was what really brought them running. I looked at my haul from the truck. Stale chips, flat soda, paper towels, a thin blanket. Barely worth the risk. I started laughing and couldn't stop. Great hysterical gulps of air and sound that made the dead below reach higher, made their moaning increase in volume and desperation. When I finally stopped, the sun was setting and I was crying. Wednesday, day 8. I woke up before dawn with a plan I hated but couldn't ignore. The cistern on the roof, I needed access to it. The observation deck's roof was flat, about 8 feet above the deck floor, accessible via a rusted ladder bolted to the tower's exterior wall. I'd been avoiding it because it meant being exposed, being visible from every angle, being further from safety. But I was down to 2 gallons of water. The next rain might be days away. I waited until full light, checked the area below, still packed with dead, and climbed the ladder to the roof. The cistern was a corrugated metal tank, probably holding 50 gallons when full. A spigot on its side was rusted shut. I used the wrench from my toolkit to work it loose, finally got it moving. Brown water gushed out, then gradually ran clearer. I'd brought up a milk jug to fill. Clear water ran from the spigot, and I nearly shouted with relief. Then something grabbed my ankle. I looked down. One of them had climbed the spiral stairs, the exterior ladder, and now the roof ladder. It had done it silently, purposefully. Its face was a ruin, half the jaw missing, one eye gone, but it had climbed 40 feet of ladders to reach me. I tried to kick free, but its grip was iron. It pulled itself higher, reaching for my knee. I had the wrench in my hand. I brought it down on its skull, once, twice, 3 times. Bone caved in. It released my ankle and fell backward off the ladder. I heard it hit the deck below with a wet thud. Then I heard more coming up the stairs. They'd learned. Or maybe one had figured it out and the others followed. They were climbing now, 3 of them, 4, pulling themselves up the spiral stairs with determination. I scrambled down from the roof, the water jug forgotten, and reached the deck just as the first one crested the top of the stairs. The rifle. I'd left it in the equipment room. I dove for the door, grabbed it, turned. The dead woman, she'd worked at the library in Harlow. I'd checked out books from her, stepped onto my deck. Behind her, 2 more climbing into view. I shot the librarian in the face. She dropped. Shot the next one in the chest. It stumbled but kept coming. Second shot to the head. It fell. The third one reached the deck. I fired. Click, empty magazine. The thing came at me, arms outstretched. I swung the rifle like a club, connected with its temple, heard bone crack. It staggered sideways, hit the railing, tipped over, 40 feet down to the rocks. I heard the impact. More were coming. I could see them on the stairs, at least 6, climbing over each other in their hurry. I fumbled with the rifle, ejected the empty magazine, grabbed the spare from my pocket, loaded it, chambered around. I shot them one by one as they appeared at the top of the stairs. Some fell backward and took others with them. Some fell forward onto the deck, and I had to shoot them again. The sound was deafening, continuous, the world narrowing to muzzle flash and recoil, and the sick sound of bullets hitting meat. When it stopped, I'd killed 11 of them. Bodies lay on the deck, hung over the railing, piled on the stairs. I had 7 rounds left in the rifle. The spare magazine in the equipment room had 15, 22 bullets, at least 50 of them below. The math was clear and awful. I spent the rest of Wednesday pushing bodies off the deck. They were heavy and they leaked. Tried not to think about who they'd been. The librarian went over the oceanside railing. So did a teenager in a varsity jacket. So did an old man whose wallet fell out of his pocket as I rolled him over the edge. I saw his driver's license, his face smiling in the photo, and I had to stop and breathe for 5 minutes before I could continue. By sunset, the deck was clear, but stained with dark fluid that my water ration wouldn't spare for cleaning. I sat in the equipment room doorway with the rifle across my knees and watched the dead below. They were agitated, moving restlessly, bumping into each other. Some were still trying to climb the stairs, falling, trying again. They would figure it out eventually. They would make it up here, in numbers. I couldn't stop. This deck wasn't a fortress. It was a trap. Thursday morning, I found a body washed up on the rocks below the ocean side of the tower. It wore a Coast Guard uniform, bloated from days in the water. As I watched, it rolled with the waves, stood up in the shallows, and began trying to climb the rocks toward the tower. It fell repeatedly, was washed back by waves, and kept trying. I watched for an hour. It never stopped, never showed frustration or gave up, just kept trying to climb rocks that were too slick with seaweed and spray. I named it Walter. I don't know why. Having a name for it made it less horrible somehow. Watching its futile attempts. Walter fell. Walter tried again. Walter was persistent. At Friday it rained again, and I had to risk the roof to collect water. I did it quickly, my heart in my throat, expecting hands to grab me at any second. Nothing. I filled 4 jugs and climbed down safely. Small victories. The dead below had thinned out. Maybe 30 now. Some had wandered off. Walter was still down on the rocks, still trying to climb. Dedication or brain damage? I couldn't tell which. Saturday. Day 11, I ate the last can of soup and admitted to myself that I was going to die up here. The admission brought a strange peace. I'd done what I could. I'd survived longer than most people probably had. I had water, at least. Dying of thirst would have been worse than dying of hunger. I could probably last another 2 weeks before I got too weak to function. Then what? Fall asleep and not wake up? Jump and make it quick? Wait for them to finally climb up here and finish it? I sat on the deck watching the sunset and felt empty. Not scared anymore. Not sad. Just empty. That's when I saw the boat. A sailboat, maybe 30 feet long, moving south along the coast. Someone was at the wheel. I could see them, a dark figure against the white sail. The boat was maybe 200 yards offshore, moving steadily. I grabbed the rifle and fired 3 shots into the air, the universal distress signal, crack, 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 echoing across the water. The figure at the wheel turned toward shore. The boat began to come about. I fired 3 more shots. 18 rounds left total. The boat kept turning toward me. It was really coming. Someone alive, someone with a boat, someone who could take me away from this tower and its spiraling stairs and its persistent dead guests. I ran to the ocean side of the deck and waved my arms. The boat was closer now, maybe 100 yards out. I could see the figure more clearly. A woman, I thought, wearing a yellow jacket. She was looking at me through binoculars. Then she turned the boat away. "No!" I screamed. "Please, I'm alive! I'm not infected, please!" She kept turning. The sail caught wind. The boat began moving away south along the coast. I fired another shot into the air. She didn't react. I watched the boat shrink in the distance until it was just a white triangle on the gray water. Then it rounded the point and was gone. I sat down on the deck and stared at nothing. 15 rounds left. The number seemed both meaningless and crushingly important. That night, I dreamed about the woman in the yellow jacket. In the dream, she was my ex-wife Sarah, and she was sailing away laughing. I woke up angry, which was better than empty. Anger was fuel. Sunday, I made a fishing line from dental floss and a hook from a bent paperclip. I had no bait, but I tried anyway, dropping the line from the ocean side of the deck. The dead below on the rocks took no notice. Walter was still there, still climbing, still falling. I caught nothing. The ocean had fish. I could see them sometimes, silver flashes in the green water, but they weren't interested in my paperclip. Monday, I caught Walter staring up at me. Not the mindless upward gaze the others had. Actually staring, head tilted, like he was thinking, studying, learning. "Don't get smart on me, Walter," I said. He opened his mouth. No sound came out, just that black hole of tongue and throat. Tuesday, 2 weeks since the world ended, I woke to find the deck covered in gulls, dozens of them, perched on the railings, strutting across the floor, eyeing me with those cold bird stares. I stood up slowly. They didn't fly away. One of them pecked at the dark stains near the equipment room door. Another landed on my sleeping bag. "Get out of here!" I shouted, waving my arms. They scattered in an explosion of wings and complaints, circled once, and some of them landed again. They were getting bold. They could see I was weak. They were waiting for me to be meat. I grabbed the rifle and fired a shot into the air. The sound sent them all flying, their cries of protest fading as they wheeled away over the ocean. 14 rounds left. Wednesday, the hunger stopped feeling like a presence and started feeling like an absence, like something had hollowed me out from the inside. I stopped thinking about food. I stopped thinking about much at all. I sat on the deck and watched the ocean and didn't track time. Thursday or Friday, I'd lost track. I heard engines, motorcycles, at least 3 of them, the sound growing louder from the direction of Harlow. I crawled to the landward railing and looked. 3 dirt bikes came roaring down the coast road, weaving between abandoned cars, riders in leather and helmets, living people. They passed the station without slowing, the dead below turning to follow the sound, some of them actually breaking away from the tower to pursue the bikes. I should have called out, should have done something. But my throat was too dry and they were already past, heading south, and then they were gone. The dead who'd followed the sound came drifting back over the next hour. But not all of them. I counted 23 now instead of 30. The herd was thinning. Saturday, I think, I caught a fish. I'd been dropping the line daily out of routine more than hope, but something bit. Something small, maybe 6 inches long, silver and panicked on the end of my dental floss. I pulled it up, grabbed it with shaking hands, killed it with the knife. I ate it raw, scales and all. It tasted like the ocean in survival. I saved the bones for hooks. I felt almost human again. Sunday, I caught 2 more fish, small ones, barely worth the effort, but I ate them and felt strength return in tiny increments. I rigged a better fishing line from rope fibers. I studied the water, learning when the fish came close to the rocks, what times were best. Walter was gone from the rocks. I didn't see where he'd gone. Part of me missed watching his attempts to climb. Stupid, feeling anything for one of them. But routine is routine. Monday, 3 weeks in, I saw smoke on the horizon. Black smoke, thick columns of it rising from the direction of Harlow. Something big was burning. I watched it all day, watched the smoke spread and eventually dissipate. No more helicopters came, no more boats sailed past. Just smoke and silence. Tuesday, I caught a fish big enough to share. I didn't share it. I ate it in 3 meals spread across the day, rationed it carefully, sucked the bones clean. Wednesday, I saw a movement on the coast road again. Not the dead. I'd learned their particular way of moving. That lurching purpose. This was different. A person running flat out, alive and terrified. Behind them, at least 20 of the dead in pursuit. The runner was fast. They had a lead. They reached the station, saw the tower, saw me at the railing. They shouted something I couldn't make out and started climbing the spiral stairs. The dead reached the base of the stairs seconds later and followed. It was the woman in pajamas all over again. I grabbed the rifle, checked the magazine, 12 rounds, and moved to the stairs. The runner was maybe 25 feet below me, climbing hard. Young guy, maybe early 20s, wearing running gear and a backpack. Behind him, the dead climbed in a pack, hands grabbing hands, pulling each other up faster. "I have a ladder!" I shouted. "When you reach the platform, I'll lower it." "Jump across." He looked up at me, face red and streaming sweat, nodded. He reached the platform, that small landing 8 feet below my deck where the spiral stairs ended, and the ladder began. The dead were 10 feet below him. I lowered the extension ladder, secured it. "Climb!" I shouted. He jumped for the ladder, caught it, scrambled up. I saw a bite mark on his left forearm, bleeding through his shirt. He was infected. He was 3 feet from the deck when I made the decision. I raised the rifle and pointed it at his chest. "Stop!" I said. He stopped, hanging on the ladder, breathing hard. "Please," he gasped. "Please, I'm okay, I can help." "Your arm," I said. He looked at it like he'd forgotten. "It's nothing, I'm fine, please." The dead reached the platform below. They piled onto the extension ladder. Their weight shook it, made it groan. "How long ago?" I asked. 2 days, he said. Then, seeing my face, "Maybe 3. "You're turning," I said. "Not yet. Please, I'm still me. I'm still—" The ladder gave way under the weight of the dead. It tore loose from my deck with a shriek of metal. The young man fell backward into them, his scream cut short as they piled on. I stood at the railing and watched, again, always watching, always safe, always alone. When they finished with him, his body stood up. The bite on his arm had company now, bites on his throat, his face, his legs. He looked up at me with milky eyes and reached upward. The others did the same. 30 hands reaching for the deck 40 feet above. Thursday, I stopped counting days. What was the point? The sun rose. I fished. I ate if I caught something. I slept. The sun set. The dead below stayed or left or came back. Walter reappeared on the rocks, still climbing, still falling. Some of the bodies on the stairs had been scavenged by gulls. The young man in running gear stood with the others, reaching. I caught fish. Not enough to gain weight, but enough to maintain. I collected rainwater. I still had propane. I had the sleeping bag and the blanket from the truck. I had shelter. I could last months this way. But for what? I started talking to them. The dead below. Not conversations, I wasn't that far gone yet. Just observations. Wind's picking up, Walter. Might rain tonight. You should find shelter. Oh wait, you're dead. Never mind. New guy at the base of the stairs today. Was he someone you knew, Jenkins? Yeah, that's your name now. Jenkins. You look like a Jenkins. Caught a fish today. A big one. Sorry you can't taste anything anymore. Life's little pleasures, you know? Talking made the silence less heavy. Made me feel less like a ghost haunting a tower. The weather turned cold. Really cold. I wore every layer I had and still shivered at night. The dead below didn't react to temperature. They stood in sleet and snow without flinching. Ice formed on the stairs and they climbed anyway, slipping, falling, climbing. I saw my breath fog the air and wondered if I'd freeze before I starved. The propane was low. I rationed it severely, used it only to boil water I didn't trust. Ate fish raw, accepted the risk. One morning, I woke to find Jenkins halfway up the stairs. He'd climbed 20 feet during the night, silent, persistent. I shot him. He fell, stood up, started climbing again. I shot him again. This time, he stayed down. 11 rounds left, then 10, then 9. Each one spent on a climber who got too close. The math was shifting. They were learning or evolving or just getting lucky. Either way, I was running out of bullets. At 7 rounds, I stopped using the rifle. I saved it for emergencies, whatever that meant anymore. Instead, I used rocks. There were plenty on the roof, small maintenance gravel. I dropped them on climbers, aimed for heads. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes. At 5 rounds, I saw another boat, bigger this time, a fishing trawler moving north against the current. I fired a shot into the air, but it was too far out. The sound didn't carry. The boat kept going, and I watched it disappear around the northern point. 4 rounds left. I put the rifle in the equipment room and tried to forget about it. The fishing got harder. Winter was settling in for real, and whatever fish lived in these waters were going deeper, were going away. I caught one every 2 or 3 days, sometimes smaller than my hand. I was losing weight rapidly now. My pants barely stayed up. My hands shook constantly. I thought about the 4 rounds, thought about them a lot. 3 for the dead when they finally made it up here in numbers I couldn't stop. 1 for me. Simple math, clean ending. But I didn't do it. Not yet. Something stubborn in me, some animal part that refused to surrender. I fished. I collected water. I breathed. I survived. The snow came heavy one night, wet and thick. I woke to find the deck covered in 6 inches of white. The dead below were buried to their shins, still reaching. Their hair and shoulders were piled with snow. They looked like lawn decorations, something festive and horrible. I scooped snow into containers and melted it for water. Good water, clean. The cistern was getting low. This helped. The snow stayed for 3 days, then melted fast under rain. The dead emerged from slush like they were being born from the earth. I caught a gull. It landed too close, too confident. I grabbed it with both hands, felt it thrash and bite and scream. I broke its neck the way my father had taught me with chickens. I cooked it on the camping stove, last propane might as well, and ate meat that wasn't fish. It was stringy and tasted like low tide, but it was protein. I felt guilty and satisfied in equal measure. More gulls came, but stayed farther away. They'd learned. Everything was learning. I found a notebook in my supplies, something I'd brought for journaling that I'd never touched. I started writing, not diary entries. What was there to say? Day 47, still trapped, still alive, caught a fish. Instead, I wrote letters to Sarah, to my father, to friends I'd lost touch with. to the woman in pajamas, to the young man in running gear. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I saved myself. I'm sorry I'm still here. I didn't sign them. I didn't know who I was anymore. Another boat appeared. Sailboat again, different from the first. I waved the tarp, shouted myself hoarse. They came closer, close enough that I could see two people on deck, close enough that they could definitely see me. One of them raised a rifle and pointed it at me. I dropped to the deck. No shot came. When I looked again, they were sailing away. They thought I was dead, I realized, or they thought I was bait. Couldn't risk it either way. I stopped trying to signal boats after that. What was the point? Time stopped meaning anything. I woke, I survived, I slept. Sometimes it was day, sometimes night, sometimes I wasn't sure. I'd catch myself standing at the railing for hours, not thinking, not feeling, just standing. That's shock, I'd think, or malnutrition, or the end. But I kept going. I found a small crab in a tidal pool visible from the ocean side during a low tide. I rigged a basket from rope and wire, lowered it during the next low tide, caught 3 crabs. Protein, life, hope in a shell. I set the basket regularly after that. Crabs weren't smart like gulls. They just wanted food and shelter. I could provide both with my trap. I caught enough to supplement the irregular fish. I stayed alive. 3 months or 4, I'd lost track. Winter eased into something that might be early spring. The dead below numbered 15 now. Attrition had thinned them. Some wandered off, some fell from the stairs and didn't get back up. Some just stopped moving one day and became statues. Walter was still there, still climbing his rocks, still falling, still trying. I respected that about him. I started exercising, push-ups, squats, using the rope for resistance, keeping muscle mass, keeping functional. Why? I couldn't say. Instinct? The body wants to live even when the mind is empty. 4 months, definitely. I counted on my fingers. Late February, maybe early March. I'd been on this deck since October. I'd survived a winter on raw fish and crabs and snowmelt. I'd lived longer than I'd thought possible, and I was so tired. Tired of the routine, tired of fishing. Tired of Walter's endless climbing. Tired of the ocean's rhythm that never changed. Tired of being afraid and alone and purposeless. The rifle was in the equipment room. 4 rounds, 3 + 1. I took it out and sat with it, felt its weight, contemplated solutions. A gunshot would bring any living thing within earshot. That was the problem. If I used the 1 round, I'd draw attention. Better to wait for silence, for a moment when no boats might pass, when no survivors might hear. But there was never silence. The ocean, the wind, the dead, always something. I put the rifle away. Not today. A storm came, a real one, waves hitting the rocks with enough force to send spray up to the deck. The wind shrieked around the tower. I huddled in the equipment room with the door wedged shut, listening to the tower shake. When it passed, I emerged to find the deck scoured clean, railings bent, and 8 of the dead washed away from the base of the stairs. 7 remained. The ocean had done what I couldn't. Thanks, I said to the water. Gave me no response. I caught a big fish the next day. Really big, maybe 2 feet long. It fought hard, and I nearly lost it, but I landed it, and it was enough food for a week if I rationed carefully. I cleaned it, saved the organs for crab bait, and felt something like joy. Life. Continuing, despite everything. May, I thought, has to be May now. Spring for sure. Warmer, longer days. The fishing improved. I caught fish regularly again, crabs in the basket, even found mussels on the rocks during a very low tide and figured out how to harvest them. I was surviving, actually surviving, not just delaying death. The dead below numbered 4. Just 4. Walter and 3 others, all persistent, all reaching, but just 4. Manageable, ignorable. I climbed down to the platform one day just to see if I could. The 4 below reached for me but couldn't climb fast enough. I stood on the platform for 5 minutes, then climbed back up. A test, an option. I could leave, could try, had enough strength now, enough clarity. I could wait for them to wander off, make a run for it. 7 miles to Harlow. Find supplies. Find people maybe. Find something other than this tower. Where would I go? What would I find? More dead, probably. More danger. More chances to die alone. At least here I had water, had food, had safety, had a prison. I thought about it for days. Freedom versus security. Movement versus stability. Risk versus routine. On what I guessed was June 1st, I made my decision. I woke before dawn, gathered everything I could carry. Water bottles, the knife, rope, the rifle with 4 rounds, dried fish wrapped in cloth, the first aid kit. I left the sleeping bag, too bulky. I left the notebook, no point. I stood at the railing and looked down, 2 of the dead below, Walter on the rocks still trying to climb, 1 other at the base of the stairs. I waited until they were positioned away from the spiral stairs base. I lowered the rope over the ocean side, tied it to the railing. 40 feet of rope for a 40-foot drop. It would be tight. I climbed over the railing. My hands shook. My arms were stronger than they'd been, but still weak. I started descending, hand over hand, feet against the tower's brick. 20 feet down, my grip slipped. I caught myself, skinned my palms on the rope, kept going. 30 feet. My arms burned. The rocks below were covered in barnacles and kelp. If I fell, I'd break something. 35 feet. Almost there. I looked down to judge the distance. Walter was climbing the rocks directly below me. He'd finally figured it out or gotten lucky. He was on the right path, finding purchase, pulling himself up. In 30 seconds, he'd be close enough to grab my feet. I let go of the rope. I fell 10 feet and hit rock hard. My left ankle exploded in pain. I rolled, scrambled away from Walter's reaching hands, crawled over barnacles that shredded my palms. Got to my feet. Foot. My left ankle wouldn't take weight. Walter pulled himself onto the rock shelf where I'd landed. The others were coming around the tower base, drawn by the commotion. I hobbled along the rocks toward shore, each step on my left foot sending lightning through my leg. Behind me, Walter followed, persistent, always persistent. I reached the shore path, the parking lot. My truck sat where I'd left it months ago, covered in gull droppings and salt corrosion. The keys were in my pocket. Had been in my pocket this whole time. I unlocked the door, fell into the driver's seat, jammed the key in the ignition. The engine turned over once, twice. Didn't start. Battery was dead. Of course it was. Months without running. Dead. Walter appeared at the driver's window, his ruined face pressed against the glass. Other dead were coming across the parking lot, at least 6 of them. I grabbed the rifle, opened the passenger door, rolled out, limped toward the coast road. The dead followed. My ankle was bad. Maybe broken, definitely sprained. I couldn't run, could barely walk. The coast road stretched ahead, abandoned cars every 100 feet, Harlow 7 miles inland. I wasn't going to make it. The dead were close now, 20 feet behind. My ankle gave out and I went down hard on the pavement, rolled over, raised the rifle. Walter first. I owed him that much. I fired. His head snapped back. He dropped. The others kept coming. 3 rounds left. I shot the next one, then the next. Both dropped. 1 round left. 4 more dead approaching. I couldn't shoot them all, couldn't outrun them, couldn't stand. I pressed the rifle barrel against my temple, closed my eyes, tried to remember something good. Couldn't think of anything, just the tower, the deck, the ocean, fish and crabs, and survival without purpose. I started to squeeze the trigger. An engine roared. I opened my eyes. A pickup truck came flying down the coast road, swerving around abandoned cars. It skidded to a stop 10 feet from me. A man jumped out, rifle in hand. "Get in the truck," he shouted. He fired past me at the approaching dead. I crawled toward the passenger door, hauled myself up, fell into the seat. He jumped back in the driver's side and gunned the engine. We fishtailed away from the dead, acceleration pressing me back into the seat. "You bit?" he asked, not looking at me. "No," I managed. "You sure?" "Yes." He glanced at me, checking, then focused on the road. We were going fast, maybe 60, weaving between cars. The dead fell away behind us. "Name's Marcus," he said. "I don't remember mine," I said, and realized it was true. I'd been alone so long. I'd forgotten who I was before the tower. "Well, no name. You're lucky I was scouting the coast. Saw you on that tower yesterday through binoculars. Figured I'd check if you were still alive. Barely made it in time." "Thank you," I said. The words felt foreign. "We got a settlement. 15 miles north, fenced, fortified, got crops growing. You'll be quarantined for a week. Then, if you're clear, you're in. Sound good?" "Sounds impossible," I said. He laughed. "Yeah, but it's real. We've been rebuilding, slowly. You're lucky. We've only found 3 survivors this month. Most people didn't make it past the first week." I thought about the tower, the deck, Walter climbing endlessly, the fish and the crabs and the cold and the hunger and the loneliness. "I made it 4 months," I said. Jesus. "Where?" "Coast Guard observation deck." He whistled. "Smart. High ground. We've got a couple folks who survived in similar spots. We'll have lots to talk about." I watched the landscape pass, trees budding with spring growth, abandoned houses, empty roads, the occasional dead figure wandering in the distance. A world ended and beginning again. My ankle throbbed. My hands were torn up. I was malnourished and exhausted and damaged. I was alive. We drove north toward something called Hope, and I thought about Walter still climbing those rocks, still trying, still persistent. Part of me hoped he'd make it to the top someday. Part of me knew he already had. He'd driven me down, driven me to risk, driven me to this moment in this truck heading toward survival. "You did good," Marcus said, like he could read my thoughts. "You survived. That's all that matters." I thought about the woman in pajamas, the young man in running gear, the librarian. The people I couldn't save, wouldn't save, saved myself instead of. "I'm not sure about that," I said. He looked at me. "You're alive. In this world, that's everything. We need people who can survive, people who can last, people who are stubborn enough to keep going when it makes no sense to. You're one of those people." I looked down at my hands, scarred from rope and fish hooks and barnacles, shaking from exhaustion and pain. "I guess I am," I said. We drove on through the spring morning, and behind us, the tower stood on its point above the ocean, empty now, waiting for the next storm or the next survivor or the slow erosion of time to finally bring it down. I didn't look back, but I thought about it. About the deck and the equipment room and the spiral stairs, about the rhythm of waves and the cry of gulls, about being 42 feet above the world, safe and trapped, alive and dying. I'd survived. I'd made it down. I'd been rescued. And part of me was still up there on that deck, would always be up there, looking out at the gray-green ocean and the reaching hands below, fishing for survival, one day at a time, forever. The settlement appeared on the horizon. Fences, walls, guard towers, smoke from cooking fires, people moving between buildings, life continuing. Marcus pulled up to a gate. Someone shouted a challenge. He shouted back. The gate opened. We drove through into a courtyard where 20 or 30 people stopped what they were doing to stare at the newcomer. At me. I climbed out of the truck, put weight on my bad ankle, and nearly collapsed. Marcus caught me. "Get the medic," he called to someone. "And quarantine room 3. We got a new arrival." They took me to a small building, checked me over, cleaned my wounds, splinted my ankle, gave me water and bread and soup. Real food, hot food. I ate slowly, my stomach rebelling at first, then accepting. A woman, the medic, Sarah, she said her name was, like my ex-wife, like a ghost, asked me questions. How long had I been alone? Where had I survived? Any bites, any scratches, any fever? I answered. 4 months. Coast Guard Tower. No. She nodded, made notes, told me I'd be monitored for 7 days. Standard protocol. If I showed no signs, I'd be released into the general population. I could help with whatever skills I had. Fishing, I said. I'm good at fishing now." She smiled. "We can use that. The ocean's been a good resource for us." They left me alone in the quarantine room. A real bed, blankets, a window with bars, but a view of the settlement. I lay down and closed my eyes. Sleep didn't come. I was too used to being alert, to listening for sounds of danger, to waking at every shift in the wind. I got up and looked out the window, watched people working, building things, planting things, living. It looked impossible. It looked like something from before, from the world that ended. But it was real. And I was here. And I had survived. I thought about the 4 rounds I'd had left, about the one I'd almost used on myself, about how close it had been. The difference between death and life was Marcus driving down that coast road at that exact moment. Luck, chance, random fortune in a world of random horror. I was lucky. I'd been unlucky in so many ways, trapped on a tower, alone, starving, watching people die. But ultimately, finally, I'd been lucky. I tried to feel grateful. Mostly, I just felt tired. The days in quarantine passed slowly. They brought me food 3 times a day. The medic checked on me regularly. My ankle healed. My hands healed. My body remembered what it was like to not be constantly cold and hungry. My mind took longer. At night, I dreamed about the tower, about climbing down the spiral stairs and finding them waiting, about the rope snapping, about Walter finally reaching the deck and pulling me over the railing, about the rifle with 1 round and the decision I'd almost made. I woke up gasping, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there on a deck that was 15 miles south. On the 7th day, the medic declared me clear. "No signs of infection. You're good to join us. Welcome to New Harbor." They gave me a tour. 47 people living here in what used to be a small marina and boat repair facility. High fences topped with wire, guard posts, fishing boats they sent out daily, gardens growing vegetables, chickens for eggs, a well for water, solar panels for electricity, a radio they used to try to contact other survivors. "We've heard from 3 other settlements," Marcus told me. "One in Maine, one in New Hampshire, one on the Cape. We're trying to build a network, share resources, information, slowly putting things back together." "How many people do you think survived?" I asked. He shrugged. "In this region? Maybe a few thousand scattered around. Nationally? No idea. Tens of thousands, maybe. Maybe more. The cities were death traps. Rural areas did better. Islands did best of all. Why didn't you go to an island?" "Thought about it. But we need to rebuild on the mainland eventually. Can't hide on islands forever. Someone has to start the work." I was assigned to the fishing crew. 5 of us went out daily in a converted lobster boat, set nets and traps, brought back whatever we caught. It felt familiar and strange at the same time. Fishing with other people, fishing from a boat instead of dental floss off a tower. The others were friendly but cautious. Everyone here had trauma. Everyone had lost people. We worked together efficiently and didn't talk much about the past. At night, I had a bunk in a communal sleeping area. 12 people in one room for safety, for warmth, for the psychological comfort of not being alone. I should have appreciated it. Instead, I lay awake listening to them breathe and snore and shift, feeling crowded, feeling exposed. I asked Marcus if there was anywhere else I could sleep. He looked at me thoughtfully. "There's the lighthouse, north point of the property. We don't use it, too isolated for regular quarters. But if you wanted to be up there, you could. Have to come back for meals and work shifts, but you could sleep up there if you want." "I'd like that," I said. He didn't ask why. He understood. Some things don't need explaining. The lighthouse was smaller than my tower. The room at the top maybe 8 by 8 feet. But it was high, 30 feet up, accessible by a ladder. It was isolated. It was mine. I moved my few belongings up there and slept better than I had since arriving. The sound of the ocean below, the height, the solitude, It was familiar. It was safe. The others thought I was strange. I heard them talking. The tower guy, he's up in the lighthouse every night. What's that about? Marcus defended me. He survived 4 months alone. Let him have his space. He's a good worker, pulls his weight. How he sleeps is his business. I appreciated that. Weeks passed, then months. I settled into routines. Fishing in the morning, maintenance work in the afternoon, occasional guard duty at night. I learned names and faces. I contributed. I survived. But I never felt like I was part of it. I was adjacent to the community, helpful to it, but not in it. At night in the lighthouse, I thought about the tower, about whether Walter was still there, still climbing, about whether any of the dead remained, or if they'd all wandered off finally. About the deck and the equipment room and the spiral stairs that I'd climbed up and down so many times. I thought about going back, just to see, just to know. Bad idea, Marcus said when I mentioned it. That area's crawling with dead. We avoid the whole southern coast now. Too many of them congregating there. Something's drawing them. Maybe the ocean, maybe something else. Not safe. I just want to see the tower, I said. It's a building. Why does it matter? I didn't have an answer he'd understand, but the pull was there. The tower had been my home for 4 months, longer than I'd lived anywhere as an adult. It meant something, that place. It deserved recognition. 3 months after arriving at New Harbor, I took one of the boats out alone. Told the morning crew I was checking traps in deeper water. I headed south instead. The coast looked different in summer, green and alive, abandoned houses reclaimed by vegetation, no smoke anywhere, no signs of human activity. I reached Keeper's Point and anchored offshore, same spot where the sailboat had anchored when the woman in yellow turned away. From the water, I could see the tower, still standing, weathered but intact. Movement at the base, dozens of them, maybe 50, milling around the tower, more than when I'd left. I raised binoculars and looked at the observation deck. Someone was up there, a person, alive, standing at the railing looking out at the ocean, looking at my boat. They waved. I stared through the binoculars. A woman, I thought, though distance made it hard to tell. Wearing dark clothes, thin, desperate. She had found my tower, my refuge, my prison. And she was trapped just like I'd been. I should have gone closer, should have tried to help, should have done something. Instead, I started the engine and turned the boat north, back toward New Harbor. I told myself there was nothing I could do. Too many dead, too dangerous. She was already lost. But the truth was simpler and worse. I couldn't go back, couldn't face that tower, those stairs, that deck, couldn't relive it, couldn't save her because I hadn't saved anyone else. Because I'd only ever saved myself. I motored away and didn't look back until the point was out of sight. That night in the lighthouse, I couldn't sleep. I saw her face, imagined it. I'd been too far to really see, staring down at me from the deck, disappointed, betrayed, alone. In the morning, I told Marcus what I'd seen. Jesus, he said. Someone's alive out there? Was yesterday, maybe still is. We should mount a rescue, get a team together. There were 50 dead at the base, maybe more. It would be a suicide mission. He looked at me hard. You survived there. You got down. She could too. I barely made it. I got lucky. She might not. So, we leave her there? Let her starve? I didn't answer. Marcus organized a rescue mission anyway. 6 people, 2 boats, weapons, rope, plan. They left the next morning. I didn't go with them. Made excuses about my ankle, about not being combat ready. Marcus saw through it but didn't push. They came back 2 days later. 4 people in 2 boats. They'd reached the tower. The woman was already gone. They'd seen her body on the rocks, half in the water. The dead had gotten her somehow. Or she'd jumped, or fallen, or given up. They'd barely escaped themselves. Lost 2 people in the attempt. Marcus didn't speak to me for a week. When he finally did, he said, "You knew it was too dangerous. You were right. I'm sorry I pushed it." I nodded and said nothing. But I knew the truth. It wasn't that it was too dangerous. It was that I couldn't face the tower again, couldn't risk becoming trapped again, couldn't choose anything over my own survival. I'd learned that lesson too well on that deck, alone for 4 months, watching people die while I stayed safe. The tower had taught me how to survive. It had also taught me what survival cost. I stayed at New Harbor. I fished. I worked. I slept in the lighthouse. I was useful and distant and damaged. Marcus eventually forgave me, or seemed to. The others never knew enough to judge. Life in the settlement continued, improved even. More survivors trickled in. The gardens expanded. The radio network grew. Civilization rebuilding, one small piece at a time. And I was part of it, technically. Present and helping and alive. But part of me never left the tower, never climbed down, never took the risk. I'm still up there, in a way. 42 feet above the world, safe and alone, surviving without really living. That's what the tower taught me. That's what I learned in 4 months of fish in water and reaching hands below. How to survive. And how survival by itself isn't enough. But it's all I know now. So I keep doing it. Day after day, routine and work and sleep, the ocean rhythm, the familiar isolation. I survived the apocalypse. I'm still surviving. I don't know if I'll ever do anything more than that. The tower stands on Keeper's Point, empty again, waiting. Sometimes when I'm out fishing, I see it in the distance. Still there. Still 42 feet above the rocks. Still a refuge and a prison. I never go back, but I never forget it either. And on nights when the wind is right, when I'm alone in my lighthouse, I hear echoes. Waves on rocks, gulls crying, the scrape of hands on metal stairs, Walter climbing, always climbing, never stopping, persistent, like survival itself.